Welcome, everyone, to this special emergency People Before Profit meeting. My name is Janet Newsham, and I'm the coordinator of Greater Manchester Hazard Centre, and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. This is an emergency meeting following our budget day rally we had last week, because we've had a significant development since last Wednesday. The Tories have cynically announced a disgustingly low 1% pay rise for NHS staff after their complete bungling of the pandemic, which has led to the deaths of over 130,000 people in this country. They're not giving the reward to the workers who sacrificed so much in the last year. And this has rightly led to an outpouring of anger. There were protests led by health workers in London and Manchester at the weekend, and the police closed down the safe, physically distanced protest in Manchester and handed one of its organisers, Karen Reissmann, NHS nurse and co-founder of People Before Profit, a 10,000, subsequently fined £200. This is a disgraceful attack on the right to protest, set up to pay the fine, reached over its target in just over 2 hours on Sunday night, mainly from small donations, and just shows the level of support for health workers at this time. I'll just read you a couple of the comments that were made on the fundraiser page. Karen, you have our support always. Fighting for what's fair and right is a given right, a human right. We need all rally for support for NHS workers, putting their own lives at risk. 1% is a breadcrumb and an insult. Karen has the interests of the staff working at the NHS at heart. She has fought for many years for us, for our terms and conditions. She didn't deserve to be treated like that. If this government had drive and energy like her, this place would not be in the mess. And I'm donating as part of my thanks to NHS staff who recently helped to save my life. 1% is an insult, and it's time for Johnson to say this is all we can afford. Well done for organising the protest in the way that you did. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers tonight, including Karen herself and a number of other health workers, to discuss the disgraceful attack on NHS, health workers and the wider trade union movement. Please share this meeting so we can reach as many people as possible, and tweet on the hashtag #PeopleBeforeProfit to join the conversation. We've got 2 films to show you first. So one's from showing support from Maxine Peake, and the second one's from Howard Beckett, Assistant General Secretary of Unite.
Hiya, it's Maxine Peake here. Just a little message of solidarity for tonight's event, and just to say I stand shoulder to shoulder with Karen and her colleagues, and how appalled I am at the fine that has been issued. It's disgusting. But what's even more disgusting and sickening is the insult of a 1% pay rise offered to our hard, dedicated NHS workers. It really shows how little regard this government has for working people of this country. We need to stand together. Solidarity is strength. You have my solidarity, you have my love, and you have my utmost respect. Together we can change things. So please, let's keep the faith. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Hi, it's Howard Beckett, Assistant General Secretary of Unite, with a short message of solidarity. Firstly, to all of those who protested at the rally in Manchester on Sunday. They went out to protest against the derisory offer of 1% to NHS staff. And what did they get from the state? Well, Karen was fined £10,000 for organising that rally. And one of ours was arrested, a 65-year-old nurse, arrested and fined. Now, we obviously showed the state that we'll react to that, and crowdfunding has paid for those fines. But it's horrendous to think that right here and now, the arm of the state is telling those who worked at the front line, put their lives at risk, without adequate PPE, that they don't know how to protest in a safe environment. These are nurses. These are people who care for the most vulnerable in society. The idea that they would have a protest that endangers anyone is insulting. And this isn't the first time the government has tried to do this. There have been 40,000 individuals who have been prosecuted under the coronavirus laws. They've seen 137 complaints, 137,000 complaints to the HSE at the same time in respect of unsafe working environments, and not one prosecution. If it wasn't for Unite, this government would have prevented lawful picketing during the coronavirus crisis. Our members moved on in Updar and South Yorkshire, told that it was unlawful for them to be safely distanced outside their workplace, at the same time as being told that it was lawful for them to be in an enclosed workplace. It has to stop. Politicians have to stand up to the Coronavirus Act and say, not at the expense of our human rights. We have to have the right of protest. We'll be sensible, but we have to have the right of protest. And we have to protest against the offer of 1% to NHS staff. This is an insult. Coming out of this crisis, how can anyone think that those who are at the front line and saved the most vulnerable of society should be rewarded with a real term pay cut? We're asking for 15%, and it's not unreasonable. £37 billion was wasted by this government on the private track and trace. That's enough to pay for 15% pay rise to all of the NHS nurses for the next 25 years. Comrades, it's time now for us to step up. We have to give the message that workers are not paying for this crisis. Wealth will pay for this crisis. It is only by us getting active, by us protesting, and by us taking industrial action that we'll win this fight. And we have to win this fight. Otherwise, our people will end up paying. Solidarity.
Hiya, it's Maxine Peake here. Just a little message of solidarity for tonight's event. And just to say, I stand shoulder to shoulder with Karen and her colleagues, and how appalled I am at the fine that has been issued.
Importance of the work that Karen's been doing and the protests that have been taking place. So I'm really pleased to introduce our first speaker, who is Jordan Rivera. Jordan is a health worker at Homerton Hospital in East London, and she's a Unison member and an activist in the NHS. Over to you, Jordan.
Hi, my name's Jordan Rivera. I'm an occupational therapist and I work at Homerton Hospital in London, and I'm a Unison steward. So I've been involved with campaigning for a pay rise since last year. So like many others, I was looking out for what the government would propose to give us for a pay rise. But I never anticipated such a pathetic pay award. It's actually disgusting. I was talking to our ward clerk today, and she said, it's like you go to a restaurant and you leave 10p for a waiter. You're just trying to insult them and let them know that they haven't done a good job. And that's really hard for us to bear. We've been through hell and back working through this pandemic. My colleagues are angry. They're really, really angry. A few of us posed for some photos last week saying we're worth more than 1%. And I put these on Facebook, and they've actually been shared by people that I don't know over 1,000 times. And I admit I felt a little bit worried about this and what the nurses in the picture would think. And I stupidly thought my colleague, who's quite close to retirement, I thought she maybe wouldn't know it had gone viral. So, well, no, they were all really triumphant on the ward, and they were talking about friends who'd called them and said they'd seen them on Instagram, WhatsApp and Facebook. And I said, oh, I've been worried about what you'd think. And they were like, no, I'm glad it spread. It's a terrible pay offer. And how dare they offer us that? Twice my ward now has turned into a COVID ward, and people are just incensed about what they've been through, and the public are incensed on our behalf as well. So I want to talk about protesting. It's completely right for us to protest. Even in a pandemic, it can be done safely. We as health workers, we know how to protest safely, and we haven't done anything dangerous. Morally, I know I'm not in the wrong to protest. The Tories haven't banned a protest because of safety. It's because they don't want to be held accountable for how they've managed the pandemic. And they should be held accountable because they've really made a mess of it. People have died who didn't need to die. People have lost loved ones who didn't need to die. Health workers have looked after dying people who didn't need to die, and that's this government's fault. Now we need to think about what to do with this anger. We need to build power and keep the pressure on and build for a strike. We need to get around our hospitals and talk to people. health workers do need to be careful about going on strike, but that doesn't mean that we can't. We must get ready for strike action. If we wait now for the full outcome of the pay review body, we would have wasted valuable time. Wouldn't it be great if we're awarded a big pay rise? I would be so pleased, but it isn't likely that we'll get that without a fight. So it's right that the unions have started talking about strike action. We need to keep up the pressure because it might be a little while away before anything happens. So this Thursday, Unison have called for a slow clap at 8 o'clock. And at my hospital and others, staff will organise to do this outside the hospital. But for people who are at home at that time, or for people who support us, they can do it at home, on their doorstep or on their balcony. Then they can film it and upload it to social media. They need to make this a sarcastic clap and a disdainful clap. So following on from this, we'll be having a day of action for NHS pay on the 1st of April. We need to work across unions in our fight for a pay rise and get people on board who aren't necessarily in our own union. We need to recruit and build, and we need to reach out to people in every way we can to maximise our impact. So yeah, just to finish, the public do support us and they can't believe how we've been treated. And that's been really uplifting to see. And just to say, I really believe this is a struggle that we can win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordan. And you're absolutely right to be angry and to challenge the injustices that you're experiencing now. And we have got to keep up the pressure. So I urge everybody to take part in this slow hand clap at 8 o'clock on Thursday, and to join the Day of Action solidarity with our sisters and brothers in the health service. Our next speaker is John McDonnell. I had the pleasure of meeting John a few years ago at the Hazards Conference. He's a man of principle and support of causes of ordinary people. John is the Labour MP, former Shadow Chancellor, and one of the founding supporters of People Before Profit campaign. Over to you, John.
Thanks, Janet. Very briefly, as soon as I heard about what was happening with Karen, first of all, let me be clear, I've known Karen years. She's devoted her life to caring for people. She's devoted her life to saving people. And on that basis, there was no way Karen would be involved in organising any demonstration that would put anyone at risk. Let's nail that first of all. The second thing was to actually have a fine of £10,000 imposed, I thought was so angry making. But I tell you, within hours, people had raised that money. And it shows you the respect that people have for Karen and the solidarity that there is out there for the campaigning that this campaign has been doing throughout the last year. Let me be absolutely clear. Look, the 1% pay rise is an insult, and it comes from a Prime Minister who only months ago, NHS workers, nurses, doctors and other staff saved his life. The hypocrisy of these Tories being out on doorsteps clapping only a few months ago for the NHS, and now slapping NHS workers in the face with a 1% pay rise is unacceptable. I support the demand for the full 15%. I support the right to go on strike. And I know no one wants to go on strike. And I know health workers don't want to leave their patients or whatever. We'll know that. But they're being forced to, because there's no other option, as far as I can see, of forcing this government to act. And I tell you, that budget wasn't just about the 1% in terms of the pay rise for the NHS workers. It was also, remember, in September, £20 cut off universal credit for the poorest families in our society. In addition to that, legacy benefits that disabled people live off, nothing whatsoever, and nothing to tackle sick pay, where we know our workers, our members of our unions are forced as a result of hardship to put their lives at risk and go to work as a result of the low level of sick pay. It's an appalling budget. And I tell you, they say they're short of money. We're going through a crisis. Well, some people aren't. The banks they're booming. Mortgage lenders are booming at the moment. There's a property boom. Buy-to-let landlords, stamp duty reduced. And You know, they argue, well, they're increasing corporation tax. No, they're not. They're increasing in a few years' time. And in the meantime, they're giving them the biggest bung in tax reliefs in the history of this country. And you know as well as I do, at the electoral cycle, what will happen is they'll most probably drop the corporation tax increases that they're suggesting now. In addition to that, let me just say, people seem to be confused about the tax threshold freeze. The tax threshold freeze means 1.3 million of the lowest earners will now be forced into the tax system itself. This is a regressive budget. It's an attack on working class people, and it's an attack in particular on trade unions. My view is this on the NHS, is I think this government has taken a decision. They know that there'll be other sectors of our economy where they're imposing a pay freeze, and in the public sector workers, where fire and rehire is going on to sack workers and then cut their pay and also undermine their conditions. They know the reaction against that is building. So on that basis, they're doing the same old Tory tactics as in the 1980s. In the 1980s, the Tories took on the miners to show an example to every other trade union that came forward. I think that's what they're doing at the NHS workers. They want to provoke a strike, take them on to see if they can smash them, and that'll send a message to the rest of the trade union movement that's mobilizing as we speak. So let's make it clear. We will stand in solidarity with the NHS workers. We will support their demand for the 15%, and we will win. Whether it's in Parliament or on the picket line, I'll be there in solidarity.
Thank you, John. That was excellent. And, and we all need to be standing in solidarity with the health workers at this time. And I, absolutely agree. Our government's gone from clapping to slapping down our NHS staff, and we need to stand together with them to support them in their efforts to get a proper, decent pay and conditions at work. The people that have put their lives at risk throughout this pandemic. Our next speaker is Helen McFarlane, who's a long-time supporter of People Before Profit. She's an NHS worker in Scotland and a member of the National Executive of Unite the Union, although speaking in a personal capacity, and a friend and comrade. Over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Janet. Thank you. Karen and all people rightly angry at the government's behaviour. 1%, £10,000 fine. Solidarity, Karen, solidarity. And solidarity from the Glasgow COVID-19 Action Group, People Before Profit. We met last night and we wanted to say that our right to protest must be upheld. A socially distanced protest, wearing masks, holding signs that clearly show that 1% is an insult to the NHS workers. It does not warrant a £10,000 fine. The Glasgow group were appalled that the very same weekend, we've had Glasgow city centre, George Square, criminally damaged by hundreds of people celebrating a football win. No £10,000 fine. Hundreds of employers have been putting workers' lives at risk, and example after example of COVID outbreak in workplaces, whether that's the DVLA down in Swansea, whether that's other call centres, meat production places, Two Sisters, no £10,000 fine. Whether it's Tory policy advisors breaking COVID rules like Dominic Cummings did last summer, no £10,000 fine. And my local MP, Margaret Ferrier, she gets symptoms, she doesn't self-isolate, she travels to London. She gets her test back positive, she doesn't self-isolate, she takes the train back from London back to Glasgow. No £10,000 fine. We know what this is. This is an attack on those of us brave enough to call out our MPs, to call out our governments, and to call out our employers. We will continue to call out attacks on us as workers, on us as trade unionists, our family members, and on our communities. We will not be silenced. This pandemic has exposed for all to see the inequalities. I'm a member of Unite National Executive Council, and speaking in a personal capacity, Unite is proud to be a fighting back union. And we will continue to fight against the equalities, those inequalities that COVID has exposed. Solidarity again, Karen, and to all of us that stand with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. And great for you to, to highlight the hypocrisy of this government's actions and the attack, and call out this attack on working people who are standing up for their rights. So thanks very much for that. Our next speaker is Ricardo La Torre. He's a firefighter and national officer for the Fire Brigades Union, a union that fights for justice and solidarity, and has lots of solidarity with others. Over you to Ricardo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the organisers for organising tonight, because I think the events that have led to this emergency meeting coming about demonstrate clearly exactly what it is that our movement, that working people have faced throughout this pandemic and will continue to face beyond it as well. And that is a system that is fundamentally fouled and unfair, and a government that is not making decisions for the benefit of the many, but for the interests of its own class. And to do that, they simply do not want workers having a voice. They don't want workers having a voice in our communities. They don't want workers having a voice in our workplaces, on pay, on safety, on any of the decisions taken in society. But the point to remember here is that many more workers will now have learned that as a result of this pandemic. And we can organise on that. And we can organise that when we consider the size of the attacks coming our way. This 1% pay insult is just the start. But to do so, it is imperative that we defend and act on our right to protest and to organise. And when we look at how Karen's been treated, a nurse, a key worker, in comparison to what we've already heard tonight, to not a single employer having been prosecuted throughout this whole pandemic, tens of thousands of workers' deaths, thousands of unsafe workplaces, over 100,000 complaints to the HSE, and not a single boss has been held to account. Yet health workers are organised to protest and respond to a 1% pay insult, and we see nurses nicked and fined for doing so. And they feel the full force of the state and the law. And a state that will see us happily crammed into factories and building sites, forced back into school, unsafe workplaces, packed onto buses and tubes. God forbid workers get together and organise to make a stand on pay, conditions and safety. And this is a trend that we've seen throughout this pandemic, by the way. Every time and everywhere workers have organised to protest and have a voice, particularly on safety, we have been demonised and attacked for doing so. But thank God we have, because as we see this government of the rich, which has presided over one of the worst death rates in the world, that picture would be so much worse if working people hadn't organised and fought back and protested and defended ourselves. Every single time nurses demanded PPE, teachers U-turned the government, firefighters demanded testing, or just the everyday work of our trade union health and safety reps in the workplace, we have saved lives. We'll never truly know how many, but we have saved lives, and we've done it where this government has failed working people, as it always will. So of course the Tories want to throw the book at workers who do so. We have shown we can affect change when we stand together at every level, whether that be the workplace rep getting a perspex screen put up, or that be the teachers organising and U-turning a government decision. Our protest works, and that is why they want to stop it, because they have plans for us, and this 1% pay insult is just the start. But workers have learned the lessons through this pandemic. We have learned lessons of life and death, and it is vital that we don't just remember them, but we act on them, because we know where the bosses have chosen to stand through this. We know where many politicians have chosen to stand on this. So yet again, it is down to organised workers to defend working people and our communities. And to do so, we have to protect our right to protest. If we look at my workplace, we've never been handed anything, not by a politician, not by anyone. Everything we have won has been fought and won for by working people, organised working people, through protest and through organising. And when we consider the size of the attacks coming our way now, comrades, it is vital that we protect that right to protest, we act on that right to protest, and by any means necessary, an industrial action and ripping up all the laws that may prevent us from doing that effectively. So solidarity to the meeting tonight, solidarity to Karen and all those fighting the 1% pay insult.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. And it was great to highlight the work that safety reps have done in workplaces to keep workers safe. And we all know that in normal times, that you're twice as safe if you're in an organised, trade union organised workplace with a safety Rep, and during this pandemic, they've definitely saved lives. We've got 130,000 people dead, and they're looking at another 30,000, this government, to accepting that sort of figures, and it should have been so much different. Our next speaker is Mel Care, who's another health worker. Mel is a senior nurse based in Lincolnshire and a member of the Royal College of Nursing. Over to you, Mel.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me tonight, and it's an absolute pleasure to speak alongside this amazing panel, and thank you so much, and solidarity to everybody involved in this. And I have to say, following the 1% announcement particularly, I have never seen as much anger from NHS staff as I have over the last weekend. Staff who are facing ever-increasing challenges and responsibilities within their roles, staff whose mental health and well-being hangs in the balance following the trauma of this pandemic, staff who have faced a real-time pay cut over the last decade, and ultimately staff who are on their knees. And I've been asked whether it's fair that we're demanding a significant pay rise when our public sector colleagues face a pay freeze. And my response will always be that I stand in solidarity with my colleagues, but we cannot and will not be held to account for the failings of this government to make politically wise, financial and strategic decisions, and to ensure that everybody is in the country is supported in every way that they can do through these difficult times. When will this government hear our pleas and our warnings? There's 100,000 vacancies in the NHS, nearly half of which are nurses alone, and we are losing nurses every single year. Boris Johnson claimed earlier that apparently there are 10,000 more nurses this year than last year. Well, I haven't seen them. And why is it that these figures are from our Prime Minister do not reflect the very real and current crisis that NHS faces in staffing shortages, which has plagued us for years? They also don't reflect the opinion of the staff in the NHS who have to face these crippling shortages and manage them to the best of their ability. The two just do not add up. And my biggest concern in all of this will always be my patients. They demand and deserve incredibly high quality care from us on every single day. And sadly, this is something that we cannot always provide. If this government continue to ignore its NHS and go down this path, then the biggest impact will always be our patients and their safety. Without a significant and meaningful pay rise, we cannot hope to recruit and retain staff into a system that is seriously at the edge of failure. When staff have to utilise food banks, work extra hours, sacrifice every spare moment of time at home to be able to provide for their families, where will this government draw a line to say that things cannot continue this way? So what comes next? Action. If not already, then please do contact and join a union. Stay in touch with the local representatives and up to date with any local or regional national news that's with that union. I cannot stress enough that without the interaction from the memberships, the unions cannot fight this battle. You are the membership and you set the agenda. And I can assure you that the unions and governing bodies are on the same page as you, and we are just as angry. There have been talks in the future of strike action, and we cannot possibly hope to do this without the numbers and the commitment from you. But Mr. Prime Minister, hear us when we say, if you choose to continue down this path and ignore our plight, you will leave us no alternative but to take formal action. It is time for us as a profession to put our collective foot down and say enough is enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel. That was fantastic. And you know, to highlight the plight of the NHS and exposing the lies from this government on the staffing shortages, and absolutely important that people join a trade union and take solidarity action. I've been asked to tell you there's over 400 people watching tonight. Please encourage more people to watch by sharing people before. Thank you. I think I just mentioned one of the other, you know, there's been lots of comments made when the people are donating to the cause. And somebody said, in real terms, our NHS staff are struggling on disgustingly low wages. They deserve a substantial pay rise to compensate for years of so-called austerity. If MPs are awarded a pay rise for failure to perform, then our NHS staff should be recognised as the hard-working, qualified people they are, and absolutely endorse that. I'm really pleased to introduce our next speaker, who's Matt Tacey. Matt is a nurse based in Chesterfield. He's a member of the campaigning group for NHS Pay, NHS Workers Say No. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you very much, and good evening, and thank you for having me join tonight. So first of all, I just want to say to the women that are on the panel tonight, the ones that are watching live and the ones that will be catching up, happy International Women's Day for yesterday. And who better to have us joining this call tonight than Karen Reissmann. Karen is an unbelievably courageous and strong and admirable woman. So my message to you, Karen, is that I think you're absolutely amazing. You have our full support and solidarity. Now, the incident on Sunday was not just an attack on you, Karen. It wasn't just an attack on NHS staff and who attended the rally, but it was an absolutely disgusting attack by the Tories to silence us, the workers, as they are petrified of our unity and the strength we currently have in numbers. And now, as working people, why are we allowing this government to tell us what we're worth? We need to be taking control and telling the government what we're worth, not them telling us. And now this anger, we've spoken about this anger tonight and how palpable it is at the minute. And I believe that we need to act now. I sometimes question the unions whether entering a formal dispute might be useful, because the longer we wait for the PRB to submit, their findings and their submissions, it gives the Tories time to create a manipulated narrative in terms of conquer and divide. We've already seen it. We can't afford a pay rise for the NHS workers because we're supporting the people that have been furloughed. But why is it us and them? Why are the workers losing out on the government's complete shambles of the handling of the pandemic? Now, we have staff who are and who will experience both physical and mental trauma and complications for the rest of their lives. And that saddens me. But we've also had colleagues lose their lives doing the jobs that they love, protecting our communities. And for what? For £3.50 a week? That is disrespectful to their memories, and it's offensive to their grieving loved ones. The offer of a 1% is absolutely criminal. And I cannot for the life of me understand the audacity. But then I remember, they're Tories. What else do we expect? But I truly believe we, with our movement over particularly the last week, we have the government exactly where we want them. They are backed into a corner. And with this immense pressure and anger, I am 100% adamant, if we need to, because we're being ignored, we can force them into another embarrassing U-turn, but we cannot do that we can't stop the pressure until we do. So when we take to the streets in July, I look forward to seeing every single one of you on the picket line with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. And this is absolutely right. To remind us, this is not just an attack on an individual, not just an attack on Karen, but an attack on us collectively and the actions that we're taking to try and challenge what this government are doing. I'm really pleased that to introduce our next speaker, who's Karen Reissmann. Karen, as you know, is a nurse with the NHS, a long-time activist, personal capacity, and courageous and strong, inspirational woman, and a valued friend. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks very much, Janet, and for those lovely words, and thanks for all the lovely words and the lovely sort of solidarity that has been shown towards me over the last few days. I have to say, you always know when the chips are down that actually working class people will come to your defence, and I have been overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. I was in real shock on Sunday when they said that they were giving me a fixed penalty notice, like it was a parking fine, and then said it would be £10,000. And I have to say, if I thought I'd done anything wrong, if I thought I was putting people at risk, then you could say that might be reasonable. But you could not have run a safer protest than the protest that we ran on Sunday. And it wasn't about safety. It wasn't anything about safety. It was about them attempting to clamp down on protest. Because we have a government that actually thinks it's illegal for 40 people of us to protest over NHS and NHS pay in Manchester, but it's perfectly legal the very next day to send 10 million people back into schools. The crowds outside tens of thousands of schools the day after will be 10 times bigger than the protest we had, and they won't be socially distanced, and they won't be masked, and they won't have all the protections that we put in place. But that's legal because the government wants schools to go back so that workplace can start, so that they can make money. It's legal for 24 million people to have been working for the last 3 months, despite the fact that we're in the worst lockdown that we could be in, because those workplaces have kept going, making emergency cars, emergency buildings, emergency sort of, you know, where books, and it's not an emergency, those things. It's about making money. And I think that when they charged me yesterday and they gave me that fine and they shut down our protest, they were sending a message. And I'm not surprised they sent that message, because in the last week we've seen a budget that has enriched the rich and has further impoverished the poor. It's a budget that continues to leave test and trace in the hands of privateers. Their management of COVID has led to one of the biggest death rates in the country, and there is no end to those death rates and no end to the people that we have to hold their hands while they die. And it is a horrific thing that's going on, and I think people are rightly angry, and they don't want us to do anything with that anger. They want us to let them get away with it. And OK Starmer's happy to let them get away with it, but ordinary people are not. And I know if we don't protest, if we don't do something about what's going on, it will only get worse. We know there are 30 to 50,000 more deaths predicted. We know that there are further redundancies coming when furlough ends. We know that the economy is going further downhill. And that's why I think I will fight the £10,000. Thank you to everybody who donated. And it's such a relief to fight, not knowing that if the worst comes to the worst, it's not up to me personally to try and find it. Someone calculated it would take me 56 years of my 1% to pay that fine, which is an indication of the gap between me and Dominic Cummings, for whom it would have taken 3 months of his pay rise to pay a £10,000 fine, had he ever got one, which of course he didn't. And I do think that we have to say that we do have to carry on fighting, and I will carry on fighting. I will carry on. I will challenge the right to protest. I will challenge the fine as far as it takes in the courts as we can, but I will also continue to protest safely, not dangerously, not running around, but sort of, you know, dangerously, but protesting safely. And I will do that because to not protest is to leave the world in the hands of people who are happily killing people without caring, who are running down our health service as they drive more and more of us away without caring, who are impoverishing people and making people more ill day after day, who are happy to send people with COVID into care homes, knowing it will wipe out half the people, both the staff and the residents of those care homes. So on Thursday, I will be doing a slow hand clap, and I will be doing it collectively, because I think we have to do it collectively. People can put banners outside their houses saying, NHS are worth more than 1%. Come and join me on Thursday at 8 o'clock to do a slow hand clap for Boris. Try and do things collectively. Go to the hospitals, to the A&Es where we clapped for us, and to be honest, cynically Boris clapped and we knew it was cynicism. And I think we have to start to do those, because we have to mobilise and motivate. We have to build for a strike if we need to. As I said on Sunday as I was closing down the demonstration, if we can't protest, we have no option but to strike. But I actually think we have to carry on doing both. I am not prepared to be put down by this. I am not prepared to go away, and I don't think anybody else should too. Thank you for coming today. Thank you for all the solidarity that I've had. We will continue to fight until this government and their murderous policies are gone.
Thank you, Karen. And absolutely got our solidarity, and we'll be standing with you in any action that you take. And you're right to point out that was a budget for the rich, of the rich, and we need to make sure that we've got one that's supporting us. So thank you. Our next speaker is John Boken. John is a rep for the NEU, the National Education Union, currently on his first 3 days of strike action with his colleagues fighting victimisation at his school for raising concerns about
Hi, thank you. I just want to say thank you for having me along to raise the profile of reps up and down the country. We're having a bit of a tough time right now because We have been raising issues along with COVID in regards for our workplace. And for me personally, I'm being victimised in regards to the fact that I reported racism in my college in Shrewsbury. And I was also carrying out my union duties. And the management, they don't like that. They didn't like that. So rather than working with the rep, being myself and my fellow other reps, they decided to victimise me instead. And as part of the ongoing issue, the management sent out an email to all staff saying that they will not discriminate positively or negatively against any member of staff. This is the right and fair thing to do for our students as well as our hardworking professional staff. Now, along with this government, my management are not treating things fairly or rightly. We are not being treated fairly or rightly because they could have done something about COVID sooner. They could be supporting the NHS. They could be supporting teachers, but they're not. And for myself, they're not supporting right now the situation that's going on because they're not being fair nor right in dealing with racism properly. They're not being fair nor right in allowing a bullying situation to occur within the college. But, and this is a big but, I have a lot of faith right now. I have a lot of faith in my members. And I have a lot of faith in everyone standing together and standing united. Because without my members, I wouldn't be able to get through this victimisation. And without my members having faith and trust in me, the management would have been continuing to actively work against me, but now they're having to listen a little bit more. And I have faith and trust in the college to move forward and put behind them and embrace union activities, and seeing that this situation could have been avoided if I, as a union rep, had been treated fairly and rightly. Now, this evening, we've spoken an awful lot about the NHS, and I'm married to my wife, who is working at the NHS in Oswestry, and she had to continue working during all of the lockdowns. To only give them 1% increase is an insult. It's a kick in the teeth, and it shouldn't be tolerated. This morning I had a rally, and we had members from the NHS and British Gas, and we were discussing how we should all stand united and stand together. The rally was fantastic because we are reaching out across unions and saying, you know what, your struggle is my struggle and mine is yours. So the message I have to say to you all is stand together, stand united, and push back. Thank you.
Thank you, John. An excellent message there, and you know how important it is that we're all standing in solidarity with the NEU and all the teaching and school unions that are facing such hardship this week. Our next speaker, again from the NEU, is Louise Atkinson. And Louise is the Junior Vice President for the NEU. Over to you, Louise.
Evening. Thank you, Janet. So yeah, I'm a teacher in North Cumbria, and I'm really pleased to have the chance to join you this evening. I'm being really honest, after a long day in the classroom, this is kind of past my bedtime, but this is such an important issue, and we have heard from some fabulous speakers already this evening, so I'm really pleased to be able to be here and join you. The recent public sector pay offers have been an absolute kick in the teeth for all public sector workers, and I really do want to bring a strong message of solidarity from educators. I know just how tough it's been working through this crisis as an educator. Teachers and support staff, as we've already heard, have been working in cramped buildings without adequate PPE, with absolutely zero social distancing, let's be honest. It's been scary, and it's been really, really tough. But we've had to face nothing that our amazing, genuine heroes in the NHS have had to face. At this point in this crisis, educators I know personally and educators that I speak to are utterly demoralised and exhausted. We've seen our workload rocket as we've been teaching remotely and getting used to new technologies, but also teaching face-to-face. We've also been expected to do more, which as educators and health workers, you know, we do that because we care. But we've been expected to do more and more to protect and safeguard some of the most vulnerable in our communities, and we absolutely have. We've stepped up and we've done that. We've been repeatedly treated with contempt by this corrupt government. And I feel that in education, but then I also think goodness knows how our NHS workers are feeling. Everything that we've experienced in education has been far worse in the health service. So to offer them 1% is an absolute insult. And I stand shoulder to shoulder with nurses and NHS workers in their fight against this. And I hope that everybody who stood on their doorsteps and banged pans and clapped to say thank you will also stand shoulder to shoulder in this fight. I do it absolutely because it is the right thing to do morally. These workers deserve far more. They absolutely deserve far more, but we have to be really, really aware. This isn't an attack on all workers. We must all stand together against this. So I teach the pupils that I work with to strive to make a difference in the world, to hope for change, to fight for what they believe in. And you know, if we erode people's ability to bring about that change, what hope does anybody have? The right to protest is part of our ability as workers to bring about change. And the way Karen was treated was absolutely appalling. It was horrific, and it shouldn't have happened. And, you know, we've heard some of the hypocrisies around her being fined for what was a safe protest, and it should not have happened. But the solidarity that she's received has been encouraging. People know what this is about. People here know what this is about, and you know, the wider people know what this is about. We as a movement have to stand up and organise and fight. We have done that throughout this crisis, and by working together, we have brought about some change. But we have bigger fights to come. But the fight right now, we must stand together and say no to 1%. This is just not enough for our crucial health workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise. And we stand shoulder to shoulder with you as well in the fight that you've got in schools, but as well as the, you know, the health service. And the right to protest is absolutely fundamental. Our next speaker is, will be known to many of you for watching this event, Michael Rosen, author of many books. Michael is a tireless campaigner for the NHS and the people that work for it, who saved his life when he was fighting the very hard battle against COVID-19 last year. And I've read with interest all his tweets that he's been doing during the year. So over to you.
Thanks very much, Janet. Can I just check you can hear me? Just put your thumbs up. Yes, you can. Great. Karen used the word horrific. And if anything, that's an understatement, because, you know, this is the 1 year anniversary of when I got ill, but also something else more important. It's the 1 year anniversary of when the government was experimenting with our lives. They were playing the game of herd immunity without vaccination. This was a fearful and terrible thing to have done. They were experimenting with an idea that you would let the infection go through the population and sacrifice the lives of tens of thousands, if not more, hundreds of thousands of people knowingly. They knew this, and you can look at what the scientists said just a few days later than of now, that's to say on March the 12th and 13th, in order to see what they had in mind. And we had a government who was thinking this through and experimenting with it. You can hear in Boris Johnson's speech, his replies to Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby, where you can hear in his speech that he is experimenting with this idea and with us. And I am a direct victim of it. I didn't die, as you can see, but I had 48 days in intensive care, being looked after nurses who were under the most terrible conditions. I was in an intensive care ward where it was meant to be 11 of us, and in fact there were 24. We were supposed to have one-on-one care from nurses, and at times those nurses were working 1 to 3 beds, 4 beds, 5 beds, even 6. So you have to imagine these terrible conditions the nurses were working under in this intensive care ward. And this was primarily because the government did not put into action what was called exercise Cygnus, in which was an exercise the government did to work out what would be needed in a pandemic. And the government did not put that into action. And we've heard that the level of recruitment of nurses, how poor it is. And that's why when we got a pandemic, we weren't ready for it. And even worse, that the government actually helped create that pandemic in this country. The kind of care I got in intensive care overwhelms me just to think about it. Not only was I cared for every night, all through the night by a nurse, but you know, they wrote a patient diary for me every morning, because that's what intensive care nurses do. And in that diary, I can see the kind of care, attention, and I'll use the word love that was given to me and to the other people in intensive care. They wrote a letter, handwritten each day, and then gave me this patient diary as a book when I eventually came round and became conscious. And in this diary, I can see that these weren't all intensive care nurses. These were people who were brought in specially to care for us. So in these terrible conditions, of course, I offer support to this campaign, to this nursing, this campaign for more pay. When I tweeted about this last week, I think it was, and I said 1%, this is worth 1%, what the kind of treatment I had, it's had 50,000 likes. That gives you an idea of the kind of support that the nurses will receive for taking action to defend their pay, to defend their conditions, to fight for better pay and fight for better conditions. So I support 100%.
Thank you, Michael. And you know, that was a moving account of your experience in the NHS, and I think it's all our experiences when we've been involved, in any way as patients or, you know, in the NHS. So thank you for that, and continue your support for the campaign. Please, can you stream laptops or your phones and try and get more people to be watching? Our next speaker is Izzy Smithman. Izzy is a university student at the University of Manchester, involved in many of the fights and campaigns last year, including the successful rent strike at the University of Manchester, which, following an impressive occupation, led to the largest rent reduction rewarded for students in recent history. Over to you, Izzy.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me speak here. Just want to say all the solidarity in the world to nurses and healthcare workers. I was at Sunday's protest. It was very socially distanced. No one was within 2 meters of each other. And Karen was speaking amazingly. And when the police did move in, Karen told everyone the protest was over. And yet they still kind of used the £10,000 fine as a tool of repression. On campus in Manchester, we're seeing similar uses of police repression. We have police coming into our flats every weekend, attempting to give out COVID fines, attempting to keep us quiet, make sure that we're not protesting anymore like we did last term. It's not about preventing spreads of viruses. It's about getting money. If they wanted to prevent spread of the virus, they would pay their nurses correctly and properly fund the health service. We're seeing the biggest wave of rent strikes across the UK at the moment, as students are refusing to be pushed over again. The government and the universities lied to us. They brought us onto these unsafe campuses where we all got COVID back in September, October, and they made us pay for it. They blamed us and made us pay for it, as we're still paying for less facilities than previous years, for completely online teaching, and for accommodation that's subpar. We have floodings, we have rodents, we have Wi-Fi shortages. I had no Wi-Fi over the weekend, had to hotspot myself for my seminars. 3 times this month I've had no hot water. But this isn't a new problem. Universities are running like businesses, and they have been running like businesses for since austerity, since neoliberalism. This isn't how education should be, and we have full solidarity with the staff and the cleaners at our university who, like the students, are being exploited in every way by management and the Vice-Chancellor, Nancy Rothwell, at the top of the university, who's on a salary of something like £260,000. We've had these wins. We've had this recent rent strike win where we managed to win a 30% rent reduction. It's not over. We want a fundamental change in how universities are run. We've recently, I think yesterday, we launched the Nancy Out referendum, which is a vote for the entire university body for no confidence in Nancy Rothwell and the senior leadership. But it won't end there, although we're pretty sure we're going to get an overwhelmingly Nancy Out response. We don't want her to be replaced with some other neoliberal university management. We need a change of education with students and staff working together to make this a better place. And yeah, full solidarity to those nurses and in the NEU and everyone fighting for their struggles.
Thank you, Izzy, and continuing to be inspirational in the action and what you've just said as well. This is absolutely about control. If they were serious about the controlling about safety, they'd be controlling the risks and they'd be investing in the NHS, as you said. So thank you very much for that. Our next speaker is from Stand Up to Racism, a friend and colleague from Unison, and Amin Hadi from Salford. Over to you, Amin.
Hi, thank you, Janet. Thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of Stand Up to Racism tonight. I think the first point I want to make is about the fact that it is a disgrace that the nurses have only been offered 1%, and health workers. Health workers have suffered real cuts in pay due to austerity for the last 10 years. That austerity is responsible for why the COVID impact was so great in Britain. And actually, if you actually look at who suffered when they had that policy of herd immunity and failed to shut down properly and offer the right PPE, it was disproportionately Black people that suffered, and nurses and health workers that died in that first wave in huge numbers. 94% of the doctors that died, well, one doctor that died was from a BME background. They didn't really care, did they, that they put health workers' lives on the risk and didn't provide them with a proper PPE at the time, or that they were responsible for the systematic racism that those workers faced within the NHS. Less likely to be believed if they raised concerns about PPE, more likely to be disciplined or challenged if they raised any concerns about it, more likely to be placed in frontline jobs that put them at greater risk. That systematic racism the government has refused to recognise at any point. The Stand Up Racism has continued to campaign and fight for the fact that there should have been a full public inquiry into what happened and why it is a disproportionate impact on Black people. Even in this wave, although the stats are hard to find from this government, 3 times more likely to die if you're or Black and BME in this country. And so that's why it's a disgrace that nurses have been only offered 1%. They put their lives on the line for all of us in the last 12 months. And this is the supposed reward given to us by this government. But it's time for us to stand together with the nurses. It's time to us to actually organise, continue to organise against the racism, the systematic racism that we face. We're coming up to UN Anti-Racism Day, which we're going to have protests, taking the knee on the day at 1 o'clock across wherever you are to get involved in that. And I think it's so important that we all take part in taking the knee for so many reasons. In solidarity with George Floyd and all the victims of police brutality in the US, the fact that footballers still take the knee today, and we should be taking the knee in solidarity with them standing up against racism. And many of them have suffered racist abuse because of the stance that they continue to take. For the long list of victims in our own country that have died at the hands of the police. Take the knee for those Windrush victims who were denied their rights and are still fighting for compensation. Take the knee for thousands of refugees that lie at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. Take the knee for the rampant Islamophobia from people like Boris Johnson, who talk about women as letterboxes and degrade them, and the way that they've treated Shamila Begum and refused her right to come back to this country. Take the knee for the thousands of adults and children living rough in squalid camps in northern France. We must end this hostile environment and fight for genuine equality and peace for all. So please get involved in 1 o'clock, taking the knee on the 20th, wherever you are. Please do that in the workplace, because we'll be having a Twitter storm and tweeting out between 1 and 2 on the 20th. Please join us for our international rally at 5 o'clock later to show that we're opposing racism across the world, and we're joined by speakers from countries all over the world. So please join us in our struggle to fight for racial equality. Support the nurses, because they're the most multiracial workforce we've got in this country. Let's support them, stand together with them, black and white unite. Let's show the unity can make a real difference in our society and fight this government.
Thank you so much, Amin. And thank you for highlighting the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on our black workers and our black comrades. And absolutely Black Lives Matter, and support the action that Amin's been talking about. We're down to the last 2 speakers. And our next speaker is Ruth Brown from the University of East London, a UCU branch that's been in dispute fighting redundancies. Over to you, Ruth.
I'm from the University and College Union at the University of East London. It was great to hear Izzy speak. Well done. We've been on strike because the university gave compulsory redundancy to 4 activists, like John, victimised because our union, has been speaking out about health and safety and about workloads. We've only been on strike for 2 days so far, but we've already had great success. The management's backed down and the jobs were saved of our union chair and union vice chair. So we showed that you can't just get away with sacking union leaders. And it's further evidence that striking works and that pressure from solidarity and social media works. So please support us on Twitter, #SaveUEL. And also look on Twitter for our rally that's on Wednesday at noon. Because we're winning, but we're only halfway there. We're going to keep pushing to stop the other 2 compulsory redundancies. The other 2 professors who've both worked hard for the university for 25 years. They're the authors of many books, greatly respected by many people all over the world. Both are women. On International Women's Day yesterday, I was wondering, what does a woman have to do in her workplace to get decent work conditions and decent pay? In the case of nurses, you can risk your life. You can provide skilled care for all of us when we need care the most. You can go to hell and back, like Jordan was saying earlier, and your bosses will still give you rubbish work conditions and rubbish pay. Women are fed up of the pay gap. We're fed up of being kept on precarious contracts. Last summer, the University of East London dismissed 179 lecturers on precarious contracts at the end of their contracts, refusing to extend them to September. They spent the summer without sick pay or income from the university. A disproportionate number of these precarious lecturers are BAME, black and minority ethnic, 42%. And the majority of part-time lecturers are women who are often underpaid. Women are fed up of being undervalued. Well, I've got news for all those managers and Tory politicians. Women who they value least happen to include the very people that the public value most. The predominantly female profession that the public hold closest to their hearts are the nurses. The public still applaud you in our hearts. We still need you, we will not forget you, and we know that you deserve a proper pay rise.
Thank you, Ruth. And absolutely, we stand in solidarity with you in your action and hope that you're successful in fighting the redundancies. Just to remind you again that we need to be supporting the slow clap on Thursday in protest at the 1% offer and the big day of action on April the 1st. This is about, about support and solidarity. Our final speaker tonight is Lauren French from Dudley, and she helped immediately set up the Donate Me page for Karen. Over to you, Lauren.
Thanks, Janet, and thank you to Karen for inviting me to speak tonight. I'm honoured to be amongst a panel of such incredible people. As I mentioned, my name's Lauren. I set up the fund on Sunday to raise funds for Karen's fine. I don't know Karen. I don't work for the NHS, but I'm a socialist and I'm fiercely supportive of all of you that so selflessly devote your lives to the profession. On Sunday, I was just minding my own business. I was in my bedroom, tidying my room. I had clothes everywhere, all over my bed, and I had a news notification on my phone about the fine that Karen had received. I just stopped what I was doing, and I just had to sit down with my laptop at my desk and figure out what I could do. I just felt so outraged about it. I set it up because I couldn't face the idea of someone that had worked so relentlessly, putting their life at risk over the last 12 months, to be handed a fine just for speaking out. And I spent the day galvanising everyone I knew to donate and to spread the word. I felt like Karen and her colleagues had been made an example of by the police and by the government to deter other people from protesting and from speaking out. And I think their attempt to prohibit freedom of speech via closing down the right to protest is really distressing. And they did deter people. I noticed on Twitter there's another group of NHS workers in Sheffield that had cancelled their protest for the following day because of it. I managed to raise a decent amount of money, but I was just one of 3 people that were doing the same thing. And after a few hours, we'd surpassed the total, and Karen now no longer had to worry about paying the fine and could use this money to pay for her legal fees to challenge it. But we shouldn't have ever got to this point. The NHS has slowly been dismantled by the Tory government over the last 10 years. And when, in many ways, I think it's gone unnoticed and under the radar. But they haven't been so discreet about it over the last 12 months. The NHS has been destroyed right in front of our eyes, and it feels like there's no opposition. But what Karen's story proves is that when we come together, we can really make a difference. And if we have no opposition in Labour, then we have no choice but to come together as individuals and protect the NHS. And if it comes to it, I'll be standing right beside you at the picket line. And I know so many other people will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. That's really inspirational. And we will be standing with you as well. I'd just like to thank everyone who's sent the solidarity messages and donated to the strike fund. Thank you all for participating and listening, and especially thanks to all our speakers and organisers behind the scenes for this evening. In 2 days' time, it's March the 11th, and it's the pandemic. And as we remember all our friends and family members who've died before, people's lives, we must vow to continue workers to have decent workers' conditions and pay in the public sector. Rise for all workers, smash the 1% and smash. Thank you.